Okay, welcome. Why don't we go ahead and get started? Earlier this morning, we had the pleasure of hearing from Dr. Altman about workforce and different labor issues. Now we're going to get a chance to discuss that in a bit more detail with some of the companies actually implementing different questions about labor and talent on platforms. And also the questions of how would you upskill and who's going to deliver it with such companies as edX and 2U and Boston University with their online MBA and MicroMasters programs. So with that, I'd like to introduce a wonderful collection of panelists with a number of different trade-offs. And actually, we can also have some giant folks among us on the background screen as we introduce different characters in here. So on the far side, I guess you're right, Chris Delarocas is Associate Provost for Digital Learning at Boston University, managing effectively 17 schools. I don't know how many have heard the expression of herding cats. Well, he's herding a herd of cats, herds of cats, which is even more challenging. He's former director of the Digital Learning Initiative. You should also know that he's not just a practitioner. Chris has more than 20,000 citations in the topics of reputation management systems and social media. He has an MS and PhD from MIT, and also an electrical engineering diploma from University of Greece. And he's taught at MIT, University of Maryland. There's a little bit of a story there because I think it's about 10 years ago. Before, tenure issues were up, I think he was talking about bringing me down to University of Maryland, and eventually brought him up to Boston. So it was the other direction. Lots happening in the Boston area. And again, lest you think it's all academic, he was a practitioner for Anders Consulting at McKinsey at Accenture, so a lot of good background there. I'd also like to introduce the big head in the background, Pat Petiti, and we also have a special thanks to Pat because he was diagnosed with COVID 2 days ago, which is why he would have been here with us live, but he's very graciously enjoyed, and so he will be a fevered hot topic today. Pat is CEO of Catalant, which actually was launched as a class project of Harvard Business School, but it's actually now one of the leaders in agile consulting for Fortune 500 companies, and it's a really remarkable project talent management system. I'll let Pat describe the business model in just a bit. He's also an author, Reimagining Work, Strategies for Disrupting Talent. He won the 2016 Entrepreneur of the Year Award, formerly a consultant from Booz Allen with a Bachelor's of Science from MIT. And then we have Tapaswi Chandele, I hope I got that pronunciation correct, who is the Global Vice President of Talent for Coca-Cola. And if we thought there's lots of different folks, that is, I think it's at least 79,000 associates for whom she's responsible. She's also instrumental in the World Economic Forum report on equity, inclusion, and talent development across the globe. She's been active in driving culture. We'll be asking a few more questions about that. Interestingly, a master's in biochemistry and clinical nutrition. So really excellent talent and technical skills there in the background, with MBA in human resource management. And then last but not least, we have Anant Agarwal. Many of you recognize him as the Chief Operating or Open Education Officer at 2U, but also the founder of edX. edX has, I believe now, 45 million learners. One of Anant's own classes has 500,000 people that have been through the class. He's also a professor at MIT in electrical engineering and computer science, PhD from Stanford in computer science, BA electrical engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras. And not to be outdone in terms of academic and practical stuff, he briefly held the Guinness World Record for largest microphone array, was CTO in a couple of startups, Insert Software, Virtual Machine Works, as a serial entrepreneur, has won the Wilkes Prize for Computer Architecture and MIT Jameson Prize for Teaching. So we have quite an extraordinary panel of experts with a number of different projects for you today. So Chris, I'm going to give you the first question, since you're both on so many of these different issues. How are education platforms changing education? What are the implications for students in the 21st century, and what are the implications for universities?
Thank you, Marshall. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, this is a question that we really think about day and night at an institution like ours. Platforms generally, when they enter an industry, they become focal points for demand. And I anticipate that when platforms become more prevalent, they will have some of the same effects they had in other industries, such as retail and news and journalism. Namely, some of the big brands will become even bigger and even more dominant. There will be increased competition in the middle layer. If your program is not different enough, or it's not somehow, that doesn't stand out from other programs, you will have a hard time surviving. And also we will see an emergence of a long tail. We'll see a long tail of niche programs that would not be viable otherwise, but if they have gateways that really channel with the global demand, they will be a place for them. So I think that's the general impact that I foresee. Now, there are, in terms of the implications for institutions and students, here are two of the big question marks, and so some of the things that I'm a little bit concerned when it comes to platforms. So first of all, when platforms emerge in an industry, they take part of the value, right? I'm going to Helmut Ludwig said, fair on our fair share of the value, right? And that's actually one of the big questions and concerns I have, because education is really a sector that is operating with very thin margins, right? We already struggle to contain the costs, right? And the question is, will platforms have a share allocation of value? Or will they become something like the App Store that is basically draining the blood of everybody else? I mean, in a way, of course, because the world cares about education, because society and governments care about education, if they try to go the latter route, I think there will be over-regulation, regulation. So, I mean, I think things will balance out. But to me, and being from an institution, that is a concern. The other question is, what is the implication for students? I mean, for one thing, platforms will make available a much larger selection of offerings to students. But the question is this going to confuse them, or is this going to add value, right? So one thing that is interesting is that realizing quality and especially fit between students and programs in education is much more difficult than, let's say, if you want to purchase a digital camera from Amazon, right? And so far, we don't have, no platform that I know has really good tools that can really help a student figure out where they are in life, what do they need, and what programs and pathways are right for them. And I really think that one of the most promising and exciting areas moving forward is how and if and how platforms will develop those tools. If they do, they have a big potential for really making a positive impact.
So a quick follow-up on that. Can universities themselves become platforms, or are they doomed to shrink and get smaller as the platforms take over?
Yeah, another great question, Marshall. So here's the thing. If you agree with me that the key value added of a platform is better matching between learners and educational pathways, universities actually have a trump card in the sleeve. Right? And if we also assume that some notion of undergraduate study, which means a very intensive relationship building between an institution and a student still remains, which again is a big if, right? Universities actually have a big advantage in that they develop a very deep relationship and knowledge of a student during their, at least undergraduate years. And they don't necessarily need to stop this relationship after a student graduates. Universities could conceive of themselves as being a lifelong career coach for their students. But here's the thing, if they have to shift away from the mentality of trying to sell their students only their own programs, right? If they focus on being the career advisor, the coach, right? And then they're open to essentially becoming platforms and proposing to their students the programs that are best for them from wherever they might be, they actually have a potential of becoming platforms for their alumni base. So a place like BU has 350,000 alumni, right? And so there's a lot of opportunities there. I can discuss it in length, maybe some other.
Can I jump in and just
Yeah, of course, jump in.
Absolutely, that's a
disagree slightly? I think the premise of your question was, should universities be creating their own platforms? The answer is no. But the idea of a platform company is creating a horizontal piece of technology experiences that span everybody. And so if every university were to create their own platform, we would simply be replicating the silly, inefficient, expensive, and crazy model that we've had for 300 years. So instead, if you really look sideways at how edX did it, what did edX do? edX was really a consortium of a number of universities. You were part of it, you were part of it, MIT, Harvard, 19 of the world's top 20 universities are part of it. And they all came together, created a consortium, and formed an organization that created a platform, which is open source. We gave the platform away to the world as open source software. And so, in some sense, it was created by universities. And the closest analogy I can come to is comparing to rideshare companies. So Uber was a commercial company that was created, and then cabs had real trouble. One could argue that cab companies were like universities. The cab companies never figured it out. They didn't get together. They had a few middle-in efforts. How many of you heard of Cabify? See? Nobody. So Cabify was an app that attempted to bring together all the cab companies into an app for cabs. It never took off. I have it on my phone because I really believed that could have solved the problem and created a system of a network conglomeration, a platform for cabs all over the world. It'd be fantastic. edX is that. So edX is like the antidote to an Uber, where really created by universities for universities. And for 10 years, edX was a nonprofit. And then we said, all right, now that we have the DNA, we merged with 2U. But the point is that universities did come together to create that platform.
So you're going to force me to jump way ahead in my question list, Anand, so how dare you. But I want to follow up with some data on that, which I think is really interesting. So again, I want to encourage both Pat and Tapaswi to jump in on particularly provocative topics. So I want to give you some data which are really interesting. So the US has roughly, at present, 3,000 colleges and universities. edX has 45 million registered users. You yourself have over 500,000 folks that have taken one of your classes. If you do the numbers on that, even if you take a standard faculty member and teach a giant lecture and 150 students per class and give them a 6-course load, which all research faculty will balk and rebel against, it would still take them in excess of 500 years to cover the students that you've covered with your one online class. My question is, what does this do to the remaining colleges and universities? Are they going to be the taxi companies that disappear because there are niche faculty and content that actually develop? Does edX/2U absorb that, shrinking the market for the other opportunities? What happens in that case?
I think I've been asked this question a lot. And in my case, I'm on both sides of the argument. I'm a professor at MIT, and I've been a professor here for 34 years. And so, by that token, my job should be at stake as well. So I'm in that sense the perpetrator as well as the.
You're multi-homing, which is brilliant, which is what you should be doing. Yes.
No, but the answer is pretty simple, which is the core competence of universities. What they should be focused on is learning, pedagogy, research. They should not be focused on a whole bunch of other crap that we do. Did you all know that in the mid-'80s, MIT had dial-up internet service that MIT was providing? Should MIT be in the business of providing internet dial-up service to MIT campus students and faculty? Of course not. We should go to a platform company and get a platform to provide that service much more cheaply. Now, we have some of the people that were part of that division of MIT are no longer here. They joined those platform companies. So similarly, I think that as universities, university professors and teachers, we should be focusing on our core competence, which is pedagogy. What are the new pieces of content we should be teaching? But leave things like marketing, platforms, processes, plumbing. All of that stuff should be left to a platform company. But then you ask, will we need fewer professors? I think the model that I think is coming out is learners at the end of the day need to connect to faculty members for mentoring and tutoring and coaching. So the model of the professor is changing. from the sage on the stage where you stand up and give a lecture to 50, 100, 200 students, that wasn't very effective at all. But we can do that much more effectively online. But the model of the professor as a coach by the side of the student, as opposed to a sage on the stage, is much better. So I think the newer model that will come out is that a lot of the teaching in universities will be hands-on, research focused on smaller group of students, but whatever can be taught by platforms in a large setting will be taught from there. So I think the role of the teacher will change over time.
Funny you should say that. I was just accosted during the break by someone who's now actually having his students take the platform stuff that we teach online, and then he spends the classroom time engaging with them on actual live projects.
I think I think you just nailed it. I think that's the future. That's the future of education.
So I think that's what will happen. It's an interesting change in the business model. Well, look, this is changing the academic business model. Let's bring in a few other voices. Pat, why don't you give us an introduction to what is the Catalant business model? Is it a platform, and what's the revenue stream? How does it work?
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me, and thanks for accommodating me as the voice of God up here, floating above all else. I really appreciate it. So what Catalant does is we have a network of 80,000 independent consultants. These are people who formerly worked at Bain, McKinsey, BCG, Accenture, Deloitte, or formerly worked in operating roles at companies. On average, their age is about 45 years old. They're people with pretty deep experience in what they do, and they're people who have chosen to go and work independently in the world. On the other side of our platform, we have companies that we partner with to help them engage independent consultants for strategic project-based work. So our model is that we have a platform access fee for the enterprises that we partner with, where they'll pay us effectively a subscription fee. And we also take a percentage of the projects that flow through the platform. So I do believe it is a platform. We are facilitating transactions between two independent parties on either side of the platform. What we are very focused on, though, is how can we make that much more of an ecosystem? And so what you can imagine, and some of the things that we really think about today, is how do we enable the people on the independent consultants in our network to do a better job of partnering together to deliver more value to the companies that they're already working with. Or we're already starting to do things on the demand side with our clients. How do we help them build more of an ecosystem approach within their organizations where they aren't just hiring independent consultants through our network, but they're also sharing the knowledge that they're acquiring every time an individual inside of their company engages with somebody in the network and actually acquires and purchases that knowledge and turns it into a deliverable. So today, we work with about 35% of the Fortune 1000. The way that our business was started very much, just to follow on the point that was previously made, actually was in a field program at Harvard Business School where they take all first-year students and they give you money to start a business, because Harvard had been focusing and continues to focus today on much more of experiential learning and actually going and doing, as opposed to just reading the case method and learning from that. But that is in effect what our business model looks like today.
So you're executing on a number of projects. Whom do you consider is your principal competition? Is this McKinsey? Is it edX? Is it the traditional university? Is it Upwork, or all the above?
Yeah, I don't think any of those are directly competitors for what we do. We have thousands of projects that are flowing through our platform at any given time. Those projects are much more strategic and larger than the type that you would find on an Upwork. It's a very different segment of the labor market and a very different type of problem that the consultants in our network are solving for their clients. Sometimes the projects look like a mini version of what a McKinsey or an Accenture or a Deloitte might do. But in fact, many of the biggest consulting firms in the world are clients of Catalant. And so they're using the same consultants in the network because it enables them to deliver more effectively the offering that they have for their clients. So I really believe what we're doing is creating what is a new segment of the workforce. If you think about the way companies get work done today, and you just pull up to the highest level, they have employees who are helping them execute against their work, and that's the majority of how their work is done. They leverage consulting firms, the McKinsey, BCG, Bains of the world, to help them execute one segment of their work, and I would consider both of those to be segments of the workforce. But we are introducing a different segment of the workforce that is increasingly growing, and companies are increasingly needing to leverage, which is independent consultants. And organizations are not today well set up to engage with this fast-growing world of independent consultants. They don't know how to procure them. They aren't set up legally from a legal standpoint. They aren't able to allow them to sign the types of legal agreements that they typically would ask a consulting firm or an employee to sign. They aren't set up to pay them in the way that an independent consultant needs to get paid. They can't get paid like a consulting firm would. They can't get paid every 120 days if this is how they actually make a living. And so we're making it possible for companies to leverage that segment of the workforce in a much more effective way at scale. So I think it sits somewhere in between full-time hiring and the McKinseys of the world. Of course, we do take on work that would substantially go to a full-time hire or to a McKinsey, but I believe it's a different segment of the workforce that companies are starting to lean into.
Well, Tapaswi, I'd like to get your perspective in the conversation here, because you're from this unknown corporation, Coca-Cola. I think actually it's one of the top 20 brands in the entire world. So you're responsible for talent development, and you have choices of hiring folks out of universities, hiring folks out of MOOCs, hiring project talent from Catalant. And yet you've decided to develop an internal platform for talent management. Can you tell us what's that business model, why you did it, and what are its successes and failures?
Yeah, no, and I think Pat probably knows we've been flirting with each other for quite some time as Catalant and Coca-Cola. But before I jump there, I just wanted to say one thing to my
You want to respond to Anand? Yeah, please, yes.
A little bit to both of them. So I've just been, elected onto the board of Agnes Scott College in Atlanta. So I'm really passionate about education and the future of work and things like that. I think this is a really nice moment where we can be provocative about the future of colleges and education and look at it as an opportunity rather than a threat. And I think it's a great example of a polarity. It's not this or that, it's both of these things. And I think one of the big things that we are looking for in companies, that when people graduate out and we are hiring them, is less about the technical skills that they know, because people are smart and they can learn it, and it's anyway changing every day, right? So what I know today is irrelevant tomorrow. But it's their ability to collaborate, it's their ability to work with different cultures, it's their ability to lead projects, it's ability to not be a jerk, like those kind of things, which honestly come from interaction with other people and being put into an environment that's constantly challenging them. So I don't see it all going into, one way or the other, but I do think it's a great opportunity to move beyond the teachers and the professors and see about the interaction. So just dying to say that.
So well,
we do have online courses on edX on soft skills and for all those topics too, by the way.
Yeah, but my belief is there's something you learn from online and there's something that you learn from this interaction.
Absolutely.
Which
Absolutely.
I think colleges and universities should definitely
should capitalize on that, with the smaller group projects and so on.
Yeah.
So there are clear benefits. Some things are really good online and some are offline.
Yes.
We get differences in the skills. But I will tell you, speaking as a faculty member, the thing I worry about is that experts with 20,000 citations will be the ones writing the content, and Morgan Freeman will be delivering the lectures on our behalf, and so we become mere content providers and not the professors in there anymore. So I think there will be, as you get broader range with 500,000 students, you're going to get superstar, and then the rest are going to be a really long tail without as much opportunity. This is one I worry about. But before we move too deep into the weeds, I do want to find out, what's the Coca-Cola talent platform? What's the strategy behind your own internal platform management?
Yeah.
And why have you chosen to do that, and what has worked and what has not worked?
Yeah, so there are two things. So first, let me talk to you, before I get to the technology and all of those investments and problems. The first part is actually organizing ourselves to work in a platform way. So we have, a couple of years ago, redesigned our organization through the pandemic, in fact, and we have a creation of a complete organization within Coca-Cola, which is called Platform Services. And the Platform Services organization brings together everything from a consumer standpoint. When I say consumer, it's our employee. So we've got people services that actually provides all of the technology, service, design, process design, communications, and experience for an employee, and it's completely interdependent with each other. We have that for marketing. I think we're probably the only company that has actually created a platform organization for marketing, supply chain, of course, technology. It makes a lot of sense there, data services, financial services, procurement services. So, and so that was a really big investment, and I think it's a very interesting case study for other organizations to explore, because we are there's so much fragmentation in organizations that people don't think about the organization implications of that. And I think that's a really big part. So a large, sizable part of my team, because my team handles recruiting, talent management, learning, leadership development, capabilities, org effectiveness, future of work. Imagine if we went at all of this one by one, and what it would feel like, and it would be a complete waterfall of things that were happening. And we have integrated that from an organization standpoint so that my teams in the platform services organization can think about employee experience. And so you're not thinking about performance enablement as one practice, which, by the way, in our case, anchors on Qualtrics, or something else on Workday, something else somewhere else, and then we are trying to bring it all together. And that's a journey. On the other side, which is technology, we have obviously a suite of solutions that we have. And it's work in progress. I will say that there is a big ambition. It'll take us a few years to come to life. But what we have done is try to simplify a lot. And so try to bring in a few solutions that interact very well together. As it relates to the talent management solution, one of them that we developed, I would say in-house, but it's with the partnership with somebody, which is all around succession planning, visualization, making decisions, capturing all of that. Because honestly, the problem that we were trying to solve is that leaders were making decisions based on their last meeting with the individual. Oh, this guy is a fantastic presenter, and I'll give him 5 stars, but not related to the data or the experiences and the decisions, and we were trying to institutionalize that. So it's worked really well from a decision perspective and getting better leadership into the room. Where we have a lot of opportunities still, and it's work in progress, and I think I may have a better story for you there in a few years from now, is that it integrates much better. The data flows much better. We are able to get better insights. Even right now, it's still a little bit of a hodgepodge that we're trying to solve for.
So I want to pick up on that point, particularly for the benefit of the audience. You're going to be audience members, people online, they're going to be in large organizations confronting the issue of how do you get the best talent? How do you educate it? Where are you getting it?
Yes.
You've chosen an internal platform development. Why not go with external platform development? Why not choose an edX, a 2U, a Catalant to do that? You've got different venues from which to acquire. What are your trade-offs in choosing one versus the other?
No, we do have quite a few externals, by the way. And so, especially in the world of learning, we've not actually invested anything internally. And so, I think our problem with learning is that
are you getting this from Catalant or from edX? Where's learning coming from?
So well, of course, every company has an LMS solution and an LXP solution, but we have quite a few vendors, whether they are LinkedIn Learning or it's Coursera or it's this, that, and the other. We don't have partnerships with edX as of right now, but we haven't developed anything in-house, and I think the problem that we're facing is streamlining and providing a few solutions that work. I think you were saying that, right? People right now need a little bit of focus. They need to have the right learning pathways, and I think that is where we are. As it relates to, like I said to Pat, I think we've been in conversations with Catalant for some time in terms of finding the matching the problem to the talent solution. And we are in the process of launching Talent Marketplace. And again, we leveraged a platform that we already had. It was more about not introducing more technology solutions into our overall infrastructure because honestly, people are overwhelmed. And for us to be able to manage a lot of complexity gets harder and harder. So those are our choices.
Okay, so it's an interesting challenge set of trade-offs. So Chris, so you've been managing educational platforms in here. Boston University, it kind of seems to be toying between becoming a platform and being a partner on top of a platform. How are you navigating that? How is the relationship, if you can be candid, how is the relationship working with the 2U? Do you risk losing too big a tax to the center while producing the content on your own? How do you navigate the partner on the platform versus becoming the platform itself?
Yeah, I think as you said, it's not an either or. You can actually do both. Right? I mean, so there's nothing like a little controversy to make a panel exciting. So I think a place like BU does not necessarily share edX's opinion, that universities need to be the content producers and live kind of, and I don't think that's the plumbing really. I mean, I think to me education in its core is a relationship, right? So the core of education and really the essence of, and also the essence of a platform is the relationship between the learner and an entity that helps them further their goals in life, right? And content is only part of it. So a university aspires to maintain this relationship, and I think a place like BU also thinking, how can we maintain this relationship for life? Now, so in some ways, right now, we are in a very dynamic environment where we have platforms emerging. I mean, things are changing every year, right? There is heightened competition in both residential and online space. Marketing is becoming much more complex and much more difficult. And so I think really that the strategy one should follow is a very careful strategy of hedging our bets. Like for example, BU is in a position to develop in-house all the capacities that, let's say, 2U is offering, right? Same time, we are partnering with them for now as essentially a marketing and recruitment partner. And we're assessing how things are. As I said, it's always a question of trade-offs and of the right value. If it's proven that the value we get from 2U is better than it costs us less than if we develop the capabilities in-house, we continue this relationship. If not, then we'll go another way. If it shows that the world moves into a situation where you have to be a member of a platform because that's really the dominant focal point where demand is channeled, then, somewhat reluctantly I say, we will have to stay partners because, you see, I mean, in most industries where platforms became dominant, I don't know if you agree with me, Marshall, but a lot of the incumbents ended up being worse off, right? And that's really the fear that the university has, right? You see what happens to news and journalism. I mean, so the power moved from content to curation and navigation, right? And now the entity that is owning the customer is Google News, right? It's Facebook, because that's where people start their journey, right? And most of the news outlets have struggled. So this is the trade-off here, right? Is the same things going to happen, or are we going to find a situation where there will be value, equitable value? Like, for example, one thing I didn't mention in my previous comments, if you have a few dominant platforms, there will be much more data about demand, and that can be very useful in helping the universities plan the programs and the areas and the content in ways that could be mutually beneficial. So, I mean, there are possibilities there for an equitable win-win relationship or otherwise. And at this point, we have to tread very carefully. But I think really the essence, and thank you so much for the comment, is not an either-or. You can actually be both.
I want to hang on to this ownership of data and what you get to do with it and control and whether or not you're shrinking the existing industry. But I want to follow up on one thing that you just said. So suppose there is a lifelong journey on this education. Take members of this audience. How would you recommend they upskill? What would the journey be? What would you suggest if these guys need an education? What should they do?
First of all, so that's a big belief of mine. So adopt a skills mentality. So visualize yourself as a basket of skills. Become explicitly aware of your skills, right? And the same way you go to the doctor every year for your annual physical, perform a skills audit. Figure out, what is the state of your skills, which of your skills remain relevant, which do not. Have access, and there's an increasing number of services of predictions of how demand and supply of skills are going to change. And based on that, same way you go to the doctor and gives you a treatment for whatever you need to do, come up with pathways that will maintain you at the top of the game. And I think that's again an area where platforms can, with the proper tools, navigation tools, can actually have a big impact.
So
I would love to add to that.
You want to add? Oh, please, go ahead.
I would love to add to that. Skills has become such a currency for all companies, and honestly, most of us are struggling to figure out what to do with it because, again, they change so much, and you really want to be able to streamline them in such a way that you can get the organization focused. So you raised such a good point there. What I would also like to add to that, though, is not to get maniacally focused on it. Because whilst they are something that you definitely taking an audit every single year is important, being focused on that is important. But I think what companies are really looking for is real life applicability. And so just make sure that you find yourself solving a problem in some situation or the other, because that is what is actually going to help people stay more competitive and employable.
So I want to ask you a question about that issue. So is it the case that you are now hiring for skills and specific items. Does this mean that when Coca-Cola is putting out requests for job openings, you're not looking at degrees anymore? Are you mostly just looking at bundles of skills? Does a degree from MIT not matter anymore?
It is becoming increasingly less important. I will say that for sure. And I think what we are finding is that the more lofty degrees we add there, and I don't mean MIT, I mean every hiring manager of ours will put a PhD on the job description if they could, right? And it's finding us unable to be able to access the right talent, go to a different place to attract more diverse talent. So I think it's starting to become a barrier rather than an enabler. And so it is going to become increasingly less important about a big degree or which university it comes from. And I think that what we are doing is we are clearly defining skills that are required for each of the functions that's required for success, and we will start to amplify that. So real life experiences is what matters. And ultimately, we hire against very clear goals that we have in terms of diversity of skills, experiences, gender, race, and so on and so forth. So we really want to make sure that the teams are balanced. So there are lots of things that come into play.
I think we're certainly seeing.
I would just, if I can, oh, sorry.
We've got
Sorry, the big head in the sky.
Absolutely. Pat, please jump in.
Maybe two quick points to a previous point, just around platforms disenfranchising the incumbents. I think one interesting thing that we've seen is it's not always the case that the supply side of a platform actually ends up worse off in the case of a platform driving disruption. In fact, like what we see in our platform is that these are people who were formerly consultants at Bain, McKinsey, BCG, or they were formerly working in operating roles at companies. And in our platform, they will make more money than they would make were they working in those other platforms. And so in a lot of cases, I think platforms, yes, a lot of, there was an earlier point around the platforms need to capture value themselves. But depending on the market and the industry that the platform is disrupting, I look at the consulting industry as one great example of, I don't believe that we're completely disrupting the consulting industry, but I do think in part we are. And it's a market and an industry where there is a lot of value that should be disrupted and should be moved from the firm to the actual individuals doing the work. And I believe that's what we're enabling through our platform. The second thing, though, I wanted to add on was the most recent point here, which is just around companies looking not just at the degree and the MIT on your resume, but also looking at the past experience that you have. We have, obviously, with thousands of projects going on in our network and people being matched to those projects, we don't tell the client who to work with. We facilitate them being able to see a list of individuals who are available to work on their project. And what we see again and again is what the client cares most about is, do you have examples of projects that you've done before that look similar to the types of work that we need to get done? Now, certainly it benefits you to have the nice like MIT or whatever logo on your resume as well. But the reality is what people care about is, can you prove that you know how to do the thing that I need you to do?
Yes.
And in some cases that may be difficult and you have to go and educate yourself or find opportunities to stretch yourself in roles to be able to build up that proof when you need someone to take a chance on you. But the reality is, I think, as you're hearing from Coca-Cola here, in many cases, it's much more about, can you prove that you have the skills to do this and you have the work experience to do this, and less about, did you go to some fancy university?
So I want to connect this back to Anant and give you a chance to respond to Chris. We've had some great questions along the way. But is it the case that 2U edX is now providing the dashboards? Can you, as Pat points out, prove that you've got skills? Are you helping do the career coaching for the longer term? What's happening, and who should have that data? The universities or edX?
But let me answer the first question, and thanks for giving me a chance to jump in, because the key word is skilling. I think as Tapaswi brought up, so we work with over 1,000 companies all over the world, and we should make Coca-Cola one of them as well. But what employers are looking for is, how do we skill up our employee bases? And everybody has to upskill and reskill for the future of work. So future of work and upskilling are big terms. They have a real challenge in trying to figure out, okay, what are the skills that we should be creating? So to that point of navigation and dashboarding and figuring out how to get from here to there, we built an incredible database and a tool set, which we currently work with and offer to our corporate partners only at this point. So with the enterprise partners, we work with them to get audit a sense of skills, an audit of what what is the current state, and then what is the end state, the two bookends, where do they want to go? What are the key areas? And it's all the same areas. It's AI, ML, data science, analytics, pretty much add data next to any skill or computational thinking next to any skill, that's the big one. And so here's where you are, here's where you want to be. And then what we do is that we work with them. We build tools that enables them to create a mapping of existing skills to future states and what is the content and courses you need to take to get that. So we built that. So we work with enterprise, and it's an enterprise tool right now. In the future, we want to open it up to anybody in the world, but we're not quite there yet. But right now, the platform is available to enterprises. And the results are pretty staggering, where as a result of these certificates that people are getting, the results in terms of outcomes. So as an example, one of the credentials we have on edX are MicroMasters. Marshall and Chris teach a MicroMasters program in platforms. And so MicroMasters
You can take my
is
class at edX. It's a good one.
It's about 25% of a master's degree. You're working at a company like Coca-Cola, and you know that I need project management. There's no way on earth, if I'm 35 with 2 kids and supporting a family, no way I'm going to go back to university for a year or 2 years to get a project management degree, 0, or a platforms degree, 0. Instead, you can take a MicroMasters fully online, no applications required. You click, you admit it, you enroll, and you do the program. It's about $1,000, $1,500, not $80,000. And when you finish, you've now got a MicroMasters from RIT in project management, or a MicroMasters from BU in platform leadership. And then when you're done, we do surveys of these micro-credential earners. And for people who've earned a MicroMasters, 89% of them are telling us that within 3 months, they've had a career advancement. 89%. A new job, a pay raise, or a promotion. And so people, just with short skilling programs that run from 3 to 6 months, people are upskilling and being able to show demonstrable improvements in their career outcomes.
So, Pat, I'm going to bring you back into the conversation really quickly, because we've got very few minutes left, and I still would like to, we have some good questions from the audience. You've authored a book on platform talent, and we've taken this really interesting perspective of the learners themselves. From the perspective of the corporations, you've described things as a war for talent, whether it's employees or freelance. How do you win that war from the corporate perspective? You're looking for the best. What are you going to do there?
Man, if I had the perfect answer to that one, I wouldn't be on this panel. I'd be on my own private island right now. Well, I think something that you could see in what Tapaswi was speaking to earlier is that one major thing is thinking better about how do you leverage your own internal workforce more effectively against what you're doing. And so it sounds like that. I don't know enough about but what the team there is working on, but I do know that's something we've seen companies thinking about is that the more and more I graduated from MIT. And I had a job offer from a company that Booz Allen Hamilton, and they told me, and I wanted to work there. And so they told me where I was going to live, which is Washington, D.C., so I had to move. They told me what I was going to work on, where I was going to go every day, who I was going to work with, who my boss was going to be. Everything about, so many things about my life were dictated by this company, by this employer. And now, the whole premise of Catalant when we first started it was that people were going to eventually realize that they have more choice. In a world with technology, why is it the case that the employer has all of the power? And I think you've seen, we didn't predict that a global pandemic was going to come and expedite the process of people recognizing that they have more choice. But lo and behold, here we are. And today, I believe everybody understands the fact that employees have much more choice than they previously understood they had. And so if you're an organization, you have to think about how are you a place that empowers the people who are doing work for you to be the most effective in doing it? And how are you a place that makes the best people in the world want to be a part of your workforce? And I think that requires defining your workforce in a different way. It means not just thinking about it as people who hold a full-time badge. It also means thinking about the consulting firms that you partner with and thinking about them as just as an important part of your workforce. It requires you to think about independent consultants or freelancers up and down the spectrum. You go all the way from a Catalant type worker to an Upwork type worker. How do you want to empower them and engage with them? Not in a way where traditionally you treat a contractor or you treat a consulting firm as this external vendor, but more as a partner who you're going to have to empower and engage and make them feel they can be as effective as needed to be able to deliver you the outcome that you need. You really have to think in those terms if you're going to be effective, because the reality is that the best people have increasingly far more choice over how they work, which is why you see companies like Coca-Cola developing platforms to empower their own internal employees to have more choice over what they do and to raise their hand and work on new
Let me
projects.
jump in. I do want to get one or two questions from the audience, actually, because there's some very helpful ideas. Actually, the first one is actually directed at Tapaswi, although anyone's welcome to answer it. The question is, if you're doing these, how are you going to evaluate culture toward achieving equity and diversity? And how are you getting leadership to understand the value of the platform business model?
Yeah. Can I just add one thing, though, to what Pat said? In addition to everything that he said about culture, I think it's important for companies to recognize where they want to be an SME. So you go to the platform solutions wherein you don't want to build that capability in-house, and it's not. And so I think that ecosystem is really important. I think the question was about how do we. Could you just repeat that first part for me? I remember the second part.
So the first part was actually evaluating culture toward achieving diversity and inclusion. The second part is educating leadership on the value of platforms.
Yes. Look, diversity, equity, and inclusion for large companies like ours is a multifaceted issue. It's not related only to recruiting or how you put people in projects, but the culture that you build. We have actually used DEI as a red thread through all of our talent practices. So I would take another 2 hours to explain every single thing here. But we have actually got bias breakers in every step of the process. We've got diverse slates and panels for every single role that we hire for. Our interview guides have diversity, equity, and inclusion woven through it. We have stated ambitions. So Coca-Cola has stated that we are going to be 50% led by women, and we'll mirror the markets that we serve. So, which means from a race standpoint as well. So it's more of a cultural umbrella over the organization, so the leaders know in every decision that they're making that they are actually advancing our goals to be an equitable and an inclusive organization.
Okay.
The second, I know we are running out of time, so
We're at time, yeah.
on platforms and leaders, do you want to address that?
Actually,
panel members?
let me switch it one. So we're at time, but actually, we're going to do this for all of you. If you had 10 seconds to say what you needed this audience to know, what would it be, Chris?
Focus on durable skills, right? Adaptability, resilience, ability to collaborate, ability to learn are much more important than anything else.
Anant.
Very briefly, I think the future of work and life is such that everybody needs to become a continuous, lifelong learner. Companies need to focus on lifelong learning for their employees, and individuals need to focus on themselves as continually refreshing. Rather than living on the degree that you earned 30 or 40 years ago, you have to continue refreshing.
Pat.
You have more choice today than you've ever had before, and your choice is not any longer just which company do you want to work for, but actually, do you want to work for a company at all?
And the lady has the last word.
I think we just need to acknowledge that every human being is overwhelmed right now. And I think the more we can simplify, the more we can streamline, and the more we can give people the space to breathe, more the chances that they're going to learn to be a lifelong learner or go and work in a very different way. But I think creating that psychological safety in the workplace and giving people some time to breathe over the next few years is going to be critical.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for your insights.
Thank you.